All right. Welcome to the podcast, episode 6. I am Noel Casler, and I'm back here with my good friend and executive producer, Jimmy Kennedy, to kick off your week with a recap of last week's events. And I guess Mike Pence is back in the news big time. Bigly, right? He's got a Bigly book deal.
He's got a 2-book deal,
Two books.
multi-million-dollar deal, man. And yeah, maybe that was the end goal for Mike, to get the book deal after the administration left. Maybe that was the end goal. I don't know, but he's sure that he won't have to work too much after this one.
It's definitely the end goal. It's the end game for all of these guys. It's like, keep your mouth shut, play along, and you too will make money. That's the MO and the game plan of the modern GOP. And Mike Pence, Trump tried to have him murdered on January 6th.
Yeah.
As I said in my car rant, on Friday, it's like, I've had some awful bosses. I've had people throw French fries at me. There was a big story that came out in the Hollywood Reporter this week about Scott Rudin, who's a Broadway producer and a movie producer, and he's a monster. And like many of these guys are. And I entered the business in that generation. I started working in live TV in 1993, which was the era of these just egomaniac white guys that had were the director, and you got their lunch order wrong and they would throw it across the table in a production meeting, and 20 of their sycophants would laugh at him for how clever and funny he was, and you would have to sleek out of the room or whatever because you'd be all embarrassed, and it's a hard business to break into. And the only way to get into it is to have connections and sort of work your way up. At least it was in my day. So they know they can abuse you, and they know there's 20 guys looking for that job. So my point of that is, I've had a lot of horrible bosses, but at least they were creative types that ultimately were making a decent product, so it was like, it was worth it in a way because you're making great art, or art that helps and entertains people. Mike Pence wasn't making anything. He was helping Trump rip off the American people for 4 years. They were selling our park lands. The Interior Department was letting oil companies go in and drill at Big Ears, like Scott Pruitt. And, all these guys were just in it for the grift. And Mike Pence didn't say a word. And Mike Pence, I'll let you speak about Mike in a minute because he's a hometown boy. But, that guy was bad news from the beginning. And he was also very much about self-enrichment from the beginning. I've looked into his history, back in Indiana, and he never met a dollar he didn't like.
No. And before he was into politics, he was a radio host. And having been in that business, there are plenty of egos to go around, where you want to self-indulge yourself, promote your own product, and that sort of thing. Let me talk about Mike Pence, because he was a former governor of mine here in Indiana. I actually met him on the sideline of a Colts game at one point. And it was kind of a weird thing, because I'm on the sideline and I stand out anywhere I go. I'm the only guy in a room with a walker usually, but I have my tie on, and I'm I'm standing there with my walker, and here comes soon to be vice president. He wasn't quite he was still governor at that point, but walks right up to me, and I shake his hand. And to me, he seemed a little, I'm not going to consider him evil because it was only like a two-way conversation. He's just really ignorant, and he was kind of opportunistic with the conversation because he's like, if it gets caught on camera, me talking to a kid with a disability, it's going to benefit me. He's definitely, like Trump, a very transactional person, because we saw during that Colts game, right after the anthem, during the whole kneeling controversy, he left immediately, costing the city of Indianapolis thousands of dollars in additional security, which goes back to the grifting.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Use my man Jimmy for a photo op. Like, look what a good guy I am here, talking to this nice little man with a walker, as if you need anybody's pity or sympathy. You know what I mean?
It felt that way.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I don't know what that feels like, but I imagine that doesn't feel good. And I imagine that's something that you get a sixth sense of, growing up the way you did, using those disabilities to your advantage in a way, because you've overcome them. And those hardships only like drive us further in life. Not that they make anything easy, but they can add fuel to our mission, as it were, as we've discussed in the past. So that being said, you end up getting a sixth sense when someone's sort of glad handling you and smiling for the cameras and being like, oh, look at me, but not really interested in you as a person, right? You can tell when someone looks you in the eye if they're looking at you like a human being or they're looking at you like a constituency and a statistic that it looks good or woke or whatever to be photographed with.
Yeah, let me do an impression of Mike. So, he's walking up to me and he goes, "How are you?" It's not, "Hey
Right.
man, it's great to see you." Like
Right.
it was so put on
Right.
the whole facade,
Right.
It's
How are
like
you? How are you, buddy? Not like, hey, great game, huh? Can you believe this? We're up
this is
touchdown.
unbelievable.
Right.
Like
Exactly.
something, be a
I know.
person. And
Right.
let me also say this about Mike. He's not heroic on January 6th. He is not courageous. He is doing his bare minimum, what he is required of in the Constitution to certify those votes. There's nothing heroic in what he said afterwards. That's the only heroic thing in quotes that he can attest to. Then he's attesting to the bare minimum of being vice president.
Absolutely. Well, that's well said. Exactly. He just went through the motions later that evening on January 6th,
Yeah.
and they had a gallows with his name on it, on the
Uh,
steps of the Capitol. Like they were ready to hang his ass. And I'm not quite sure that Trump wasn't hoping that plan didn't go through. There was an there was an MO to what happened that day. They were looking for an outcome. They were either looking to destroy, the actual ballots that were getting certified or whatever they're called, that were in those boxes that those women carried out heroically and saved. Because I think in terms of the bureaucracy of the situation, had those things been destroyed or captured or whatever, it would have drawn out the process. And that's what Trump was looking to do. He's a chaos agent, right? So he's
mhm.
looking to always just buy time, to use the football analogy, like it's all ground game. He's got no passes and no game plan and no real like talented receivers. He's got a bunch of like dudes that are just going to like do whatever they can to grab a few inches and buy time, because with every week or day or hour that they are extending the election, and we're talking January 6th here, right? He lost on November 6th. So we already have a full 2 months past election, right? That he's been grifting every day, that he raised $200 million in, saying stop the steal. He was using it to make money. And as we discussed last week, he made $122 million off of these people that he had to give back, right? So that means he made $1 billion in the election year that he can spend on anything he wants. He loses the election. Now it's an executive political action committee. So he doesn't even have the same oversight that he had during the campaign per se, where you kind of had to spend the money on advertising and your campaign workers and stuff. Now he can just keep it all for himself and use it for his legal bills, So the whole thing was just like, extend this thing so I can make more money. You also appease our base, which is now a bunch of right-wing lunatics, and, and it worked. So an hour could have potentially been worth $1 million for him in terms of how many donations he was getting. And they probably also knew that the optics of attacking the Capitol would be financially lucrative, because he's giving him the big sci-fi thriller or the big adventure action movie, like, wow, look, the Capitol's burning. Patriots are attacking it. That's why he didn't condemn it right away. He said, these are people. We love you. Go home now, but we love you. You're good Americans. A normal human being would have been like, are you kidding me? Like, you freaks, get off of there. Get down from there. You don't belong up there. What are you doing? But instead he was like, we love you. You're great patriots. You care about this country, and they're attacking the Capitol and they're defiling the temple of American democracy. So it's all a grift and a scam. And I love what you said about Mike Pence. I remember, I'd forgotten, but like in 2017, we had the Super Bowl in Houston and I was out there. I can't remember who the musical performer was. That's what I worked on, was the flyover and the musical thing. It doesn't really matter to the point of this conversation.
Okay.
Oh, who was it though?
I'm gonna look it up right now.
Yeah, they all run together. It was probably a female singer or something. It was J Lo. No, did J Lo do it? It might have been J Lo. But
Hold on a
anyway,
minute.
all right.
we'll get to that, but you can talk
All
about
right.
it
So
now.
anyway, so Pence shows up. He's newly vice president. It was in the days after the Muslim ban, which was a disaster, because they didn't tell anybody in immigration what the deal was. They just sort of announced it ad hoc, based on a Stephen Miller rant. So people were scared internationally and having trouble getting back into the US and stuff. And Pence showed up for the game, but he didn't stay for the whole thing. Like I remember being in the tunnel, like after the halftime show or before it, and like the beast coming in, the vice president, like limo and all this stuff. And he went up to a skybox and did a photo op, or on camera, like there's Mike Pence waving to the crowd. And then I remember him leaving. And I remember thinking that, like, how much did that just cost our government? To fly this guy from Washington, to fly the vehicle that he has to be transferred in, to have all the SUVs that, are part of the Houston office, Secret Service, follow him, to shut down the roads on a Super Bowl, which is already a logistical nightmare in terms of DHS and local cops and security and stuff, Oh, you know what it was? I did a thing with, the Schuyler sisters from Hamilton. That was the thing that I worked on that particular Super Bowl,
Oh, cool. It
Renee.
was Lady Gaga, by the way.
Lady Gaga. That's right. I still have the rose. Let's tell the listeners a great Lady Gaga story. I've worked with Lady Gaga a lot. But at the end of that thing, after she performed, I got a call to go to her dressing room. And I went there, and like one of her people or assistants were like, "Hey, can you help distribute these?" And there were all these boxes of long stem roses wrapped up in a nice wrapping, and it said, "Love, Lady Gaga, thank you." And she bought enough for like not just all the people that worked on the halftime show, all the people that worked in the stadium, the people that were selling soda and beer, and all these people that usually don't get recognized behind the scenes. And I was like, with pleasure. Like, I like nothing more than doing stuff like that, So I ran around for like 40 minutes just handing out roses to all the random people behind the scenes, because it takes an army of people to put on a football game, as you know. You work there. People don't realize what goes on behind the scenes as a stadium, and in a stadium, and those people seldom get recognized. And it's something like the Super Bowl, like they got to push all the food trays around in the hallways and all this stuff. They don't get to see the game. They don't get to watch the halftime show. They don't get to take a selfie. They have to work, and it's a job. But like, it was wonderful to give them a rose, from Lady Gaga, something to go home with. And I still have that out in my studio in the barn. So Gaga's a good person. I got a lot of Gaga stories, and they can go they're not all heartwarming as you would imagine, but she's got a good heart. So yeah, so I remember Pence wasting a bunch of money there, and back to the theme of this. It's like he got a two book deal, right? Multi-million-dollar deal. He could have gone two ways after January 6th. He could have said, you know what? This country is more important to me than one man. And I've seen how President Trump has used the force of his personality, his own self-interest, and his corruption to engineer democracy to break in his favor, because he didn't like the results of a Democratic election. And that's too much for me, because beyond Republican, beyond this or that, beyond conservative Christian, I'm an American. A lot of people came before me and sacrificed a lot for this country and for what we just went through, and for the people to vote democratically. He didn't do that. He kept his mouth shut so he could make a buck. There's nothing more fake Christian than that. And don't even get me started on the fact that the guy's a homophobe. That's just like, get out of my face with that.
Yeah, I was going to mention one of the things that kind of got him national attention. He went on George Stephanopoulos shortly after he had instituted the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, REFRA, which that was the whole, a bakery can deny a gay couple, a cake for their wedding. The whole idea of a private business is you don't have to accept business. If you choose not to, you can say, we're sorry, but we're not going to honor this order. Like, there doesn't have to be a law on the books for that sort of thing. That's what made it so controversial. It's like, you're stating that you're homophobic by passing this kind of legislation,
Absolutely, because it's a winning point for people that have been manipulated.
Right.
There's a lot of manipulation that goes on to these Southern evangelicals, these sort of like white Christian, Jesus doesn't want you to have an abortion, and God hates homosexuals. No, he doesn't. Love is love. Love is love. You're lucky to have parents. You're lucky to have a good marriage and a partner. It doesn't matter what that person looks like. It doesn't matter what that sexual orientation is. It's all natural. It's all normal. It might not be your norm, but who are you to say it's not right? My mom's a lesbian. I had two moms at one point. They broke up, but I lived in a household with two lesbian mothers. It was great. The parenting is parenting. It doesn't matter like what if your parents are the same sex or not. You're lucky to have them. And they know that. They know that. And they know that like a lot of these guys, they sort of like live in the shadows. The thing is, if you have a way that you are, what life should be about is expressing that and becoming that, but they sort of grow up in this fear and these things where like gay is bad. I can't, be gay. And like, let's face it, like Pence is probably gay, I have kind of gaydar, and I have especially gaydar for like repressed gay men that do it
Mhm.
all in the side, that do it all in the bathroom and, wherever like, and he's like, he looks like he'd be on a postcard for that kind of thing, and there's nothing wrong with being gay, but there is something wrong with being homophobic when you're probably denying a truth deep within yourself because then it becomes like a violence against yourself, and that's easy to make malicious and malignant out in the world, and that's what we see with these policies. This week the state senate in, I think it was Alabama, over, there's this trans, they want to like legislate homophobia against trans youth, right? They want to make it illegal for trans youth to seek health care, right? And the governor, rightly so, I think it was Asa Hutchinson, vetoed that bill. And then the state legislator overturned it again. They're fighting to the death to deny health care to children that happen to be trans. If you're trans, more power to you. I have friends who have transitioned. I promise you, if you're blessed enough to have a friend that go through something like that, and you get to watch the process. I don't mean physically. I mean, you get to see the transformation of somebody
Right.
coming out and living their truth. It is one of the most courageous things you will ever witness. You will be inspired by it, and the joy that you'll get from a friend who finally gets to be who they believe they were meant to be on this earth is a blessing, and it's an inspiration, and it's a very brave act. This other thing like the transgender ban in the military, screw that. I want a trans next to me in the foxhole. Like, you had the bravery to come out and live your truth in a homophobic society, more or less. Get in front of me and lead me out of the jungle, sister or brother or whatever you identify with, because you got more guts than I do, and you've already proved it where it counts. So forget the toxic masculinity. Like, you've already proven you're a warrior, and that's what we want. We strengthen from that. We want that kind of metal in our society. We want people that have proven themselves culturally, that are not afraid to stand up and be who they are. That's what makes America great. Not the people hiding in the shadows, proclaiming piety over others and discriminating hate so they can manipulate other people for their own profit. That's cowardice. That's thievery. That's criminal, and that's unjust.
Well, and how miserable do you personally have to be to deny someone else, an entirely different person, their own happiness? You know, like it's just it's ignorance. I'm going to stay in my perspective where I'm comfortable instead of just, I don't know, talking to them and learning from their experience. Everybody that I try to encounter, it may not go great, but that's part of every interaction. That's the beauty of life. You run into different people, you learn different things from them, and hopefully in the end, we're all working to heal one another. That's ultimately the goal. So
Absolutely. And you learn something from it. You take something from it. Everything is like sort of laid out in front of you for a reason. Life is random, but it also has a purpose. And your job is to figure out, like, my life has meaning, your life has meaning, and the universe has a purpose. That was told to me by Carlos Santana. I was sitting one time at the Latin Grammys. I'll diverge into a story here. I was sitting at the Latin Grammys. I was out there working with Jose Feliciano, who's a brilliant guitar player. He was a child prodigy in Puerto Rico when he was a kid. He's come to the United States. He's had a many decades long career, and he was performing at the Latin Grammys, and we were sitting backstage having lunch. I was there with his lovely family that I'm still friends with, and Carlos Santana, who was on the show, came by, who's another hero. And I'm sitting down eating, and Carlos is there. And I mentioned this quote that Carlos had in a program I'd seen recently. And he was talking about a friend who had passed away, had killed himself. And he said the guy killed himself. He was drowning in a glass of water. He couldn't see the big picture, and that struck me as profound, because that's what these people are. They're drowning in a glass of water. They're afraid of the big picture, and you don't want to react to life with fear in your heart. You want love in your heart, as we discussed last week, right? So I said this to Carlos, and he said, "Hey, you want to hear the meaning of life? Come here, I'll tell you." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Come here, I'll tell you the meaning of life." And he had me get up, and I walk over to him, and he's got his cool hat on, and he's standing there. He's like, "Look into my eyes, look deep into my eyes." And he's got his eyes are like these saucers, these just pools of kind of wisdom. And I look deep into his eyes, and he goes, "My life and your life have meaning." And he touches my heart, touches his heart. "My life and your life have meaning." He says it twice. "And the universe has purpose."
Dude.
And I was like, whoa. And like, I don't know what he did when he touched my heart, but it was like I felt his energy, and I felt his message. And he was just like,
Yeah.
There's a reason you're here. You may not know it yet, and you may not even know it while you're here, but you have to trust in the fact that it has meaning and a purpose, and that we're part of a bigger picture here. And everybody's meant to like rise to the occasion and the circumstance of their life. And hopefully that, it breaks your heart open. It increases your capacity to love and feel compassion. When you're moving towards that, you're moving in the right direction in life, because you're going to make this a better place. When you're moving in the direction of legislating hate and appealing to a certain group because you want to be a part of that group, because that's where you feel like you'll get your security, whether it's financially or politically or whatever, you're in the wrong direction. You're standing in the way of life, like Bob Dylan used to sing about, like get out of the way. Like the times are changing, and there's a lot of people that don't want the times to change right now. That's what making America great again. It was like, let's make it the 50s again. Let's make sure all these other people know their place, and the white man is king, and he can do whatever he wants, and nobody can call him on his shit.
I'm so glad you brought up Carlos Santana. I was listening to my dad's studio album that he put out, just the cover songs that he had done, and one of them was "Smooth" by Santana, which he just kills, and I love that song. So I always have respect for Carlos Santana. But going back to what you were talking about with like privilege and just wanting to be kind of exclusive in your experience of life, there's nobody more exclusive than Matt Gaetz, who continues to spiral downward. I was listening to some of his congressional testimony, just interviewing different witnesses, and the guy's a jerk. He's a punk. Like the way that he talks, having grown up in a pretty privileged area of the suburbs of Indianapolis, he sounds just like the guys that said, "Do you know who my dad is? I'm going to have my dad get after you." It's the same kind of tone, man. Same kind of tone.
Tell me about it, man. I know all about those kind of guys.
Yeah.
I've run with a lot of those folks, and been in those circles. And that's what he's a product of. That's goes back to the Make America Great Again. Do you know who I am? Do you know how powerful I am? I am untouchable. And he tried to talk about his time as a legislator. He voted against investigating Alex Acosta. Alex Acosta was, Trump's appointee that had like given Jeffrey Epstein the green light, or that sweet deal that he got when he was sentenced to prison in Palm Beach, and he was allowed to leave during the day and go back to his house and continue to assault girls and do all this nefarious child sex trafficking.
Right.
They wanted to go back and take a deeper look at how that all went down, because he got a sweet deal that gave immunity to anybody else that had been involved in this. So, Epstein was going to admit that he had done something wrong, but anybody else he associated with, people like Donald Trump, who was associate for many years and good friend, and was on the record saying such, they wouldn't be brought into any future legislation, right? So that all fell apart when Epstein got arrested by the SDNY, and then the Congress wanted to investigate, like, hey, let's go back and look at Acosta's role in this, right? Matt Gaetz voted against that, right? Now, what did we just learn? We learned that Matt Gaetz has now been, what's the proper term here? Substantially, there's substantial allegations based on somebody who was there with him, who is now turned, state's witness and accepted a plea deal, that Matt was paying via Venmo to have sex with teenage girls, right?
Yeah.
So sex trafficking may not be something you want to look deep in, You go.
Well, I mean, he was also like the single vote against a child trafficking bill that was going to put a stop to a lot of it. Like, and the whole QAnon conspiracy is built on child pedophilia, and it's the GOP that's leading the charge with this sort of thing. Like, it's all built on, it's a house of cards of lies that's all tumbling down. I feel like it's going to be a much bigger thing by the end of this.
Well, let's hope the public has a stomach for it being a much bigger thing. I generally think that people don't, because it goes a lot deeper than just Matt Gaetz and Donald Trump. We live in a society that is over sexualized teenage girls, MTV, Viacom, like you name it, selling, like, look at TikTok. If all teenagers are girls, then TikTok is the biggest child porn site on the internet, because it's nothing but teenage girls, like, or whatever this stuff is. How much stomach does the public have to start looking under these rocks? I hope it's a lot. I hope it's more than just people getting angry on Twitter and having wokeisms like, don't call them women, they're girls. Well, I don't know. An 18, 19-year-old seems like a woman. My mom had me at 19. She wasn't a girl. She was a 19-year-old young woman, So they're girls if they're little girls, if they're 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, underage girls. But it seems like people want to fight now about nomenclature or, the proper semantics of how we address them, other than say, like, what's going on here? Why does this keep cropping up in the lives of all these powerful men, and less than powerful men, why is this happening, and how do we stop it? How much of an appetite for that does the public really have? That's yet to be determined. I don't think, people, Epstein was done. He went away, and Epstein was not alone. Epstein, was giving money to Harvard. He was a well-known fixture in Carnegie Hill in my neighborhood. He would show up at events. Ghislaine Maxwell would show up at events, at cancer charities, as I said before, where they'd give you, you give a lot of money to the right people, they don't look at what you're doing around your pool in the Hamptons in the summertime. They don't look at who you're having over your house in Palm Beach. And that's part of what people like Matt Gaetz are trying to protect. Now, enter into that QAnon, which is Russian cyber ops, it's psychological warfare against a very vulnerable population. They know, anybody who's spent more than 10 minutes with Donald Trump knows he has a taste for young girls, that he likes to brag about it, that he owned a beauty pageant called, Miss Teen USA, Miss Universe. Like, that should tell you a lot about the guy right there, that he was going to own and purvey an organization which was a contest to find out which teenage girl was hotter, and like, you took so much, interest in that you wanted to make it a TV show. That you thought other people would find this very entertaining and scintillating, and they did. And then you made your 16-year-old daughter the host of it, right? So think about that industry. He didn't do that alone, and I worked in that business, and I thought it was disgusting, and so did cameramen, and so did all these other people, but they took the gig. Right? TV trucks were filled with union workers. I'm not indicting those people. I'm saying it's all part of an industry, right? So anyway, QAnon is psychological warfare. So they know that Trump is probably your predator in chief, right? They know that if anybody can probably get a credible accusation of having sex with an underage girl besides Jeffrey Epstein, it's his buddy Donald Trump, right? So they know they have to get in front of this issue, and they know what a hot button emotional issue it is, right? Especially for women, because most women, unfortunately, or many women have been victims of sexual harassment, sexual assault, um, you know, uh, you know, incest, all kinds of horrific things happen to women since the beginning of time, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So they know that that stuff is gonna work itself. It's going to have it's like jujitsu. Like if you introduce that to a population that is likely to have been victims of this themselves and say, here's an organization that's going to fight that stuff and you can be part of that fight. That's going to have a vast appeal to these women. And you've seen in Michigan and Wisconsin and the people attacking the Capitol, they really believe that QAnon is in this big fight against, pedophilia. And Trump even said it in one of his debates. He had the debate with Savannah Guthrie and she asked him about it. And he's like, well, I don't know much about it, but I know they're against pedophilia and so am I. They're not really a thing, so they're not really against pedophilia. But once again, he's aligning himself with that psychological warfare. And that is being unleashed on a vulnerable population that then becomes the warriors. It's almost psychological terrorism. And this is not to say that there isn't anything wrong with all that stuff. There is, and there should be a way to root it out. But you don't root it out by the guys that are actually protecting it happening. And that's what Trump and Matt Gaetz is. You see the point I'm trying to make here? QAnon gives them cover to continue to be purveyors of sex trafficking. Ivanka Trump making it her theme in the White House that she was going to be anti-sex trafficking while her dad owned a modeling agency that basically was sex trafficking. And she knew all about it because she was in that same agency. She was at Elite Models when her dad was doing all that stuff. She knows who John Casablancas is. She was a part of that world. She knew her dad was stacking them up 6 deep in bunk beds downtown, and taking away their passports and making them work off their visas and stuff. She knew all about that. Ivanka's not stupid. Okay. But she was a part of it. But if you get in front of the issue, all you need to do is make your people believe that you're on the right side of this issue. And that's what Matt Gaetz's strategy was. That's why he went on Tucker Carlson the minute this story broke. Within a half an hour of this story breaking, he was booked on Tucker Carlson a week and a half ago. He'll never be back there again because he threw Tucker under the bus too, right? But that was the game plan. Get in front of this. And it doesn't work in courts and it doesn't work on juries, but it works in the court of public opinion. And so far, public opinion has been all that matters, right? Because nobody's been held accountable. Trump has not been brought up on all these charges that everybody's waiting for. Hopefully Matt Gaetz now will be, because it does look like there's some meat to this. But, we'll see how it plays out. It's still Florida. His father is still a very powerful state senator, and he's still a very wealthy white man in probably the most corrupt state in America.
Yeah. Matt Gaetz is like Florida man personified. Like ultimately by the end of Matt Gaetz's time, it will probably be horrific what we find out about that guy, and he won't last in prison. Even prisoners have certain standards. Like even prisoners don't like child sex offenders, so I don't think he'll be making any kind of friends in prison anytime soon. And going back to your point about how our society is like over sexualized, and I see that in my generation all the time. Girls my age are comparing themselves to one another, who has the best clothes, who has the best opportunity for whatever it is. And I'm not trying to discredit her work for trying to improve like the privatization of prisons, but I think the correlation between Kim Kardashian being an attractive reality TV star and Donald Trump being president, that union was made in part because Kim is just an attractive person and can get a lot of eyeballs. It's all about ratings for Donald, and I think that was part of the strategy, was to invite Kim so that could get some attention.
Absolutely. And I was sort of unaware of the Kim Kardashian phenomena when it began. And another Super Bowl story, when the Saints won, it was the best like celebration on the field of any Super Bowl I was a part of, which was like 12. And, when the Giants won out in Phoenix, that was amazing. Like, cause that was my team and that was just a great the greatest sporting event I've ever witnessed. You know,
Yeah.
that was just like beyond thrilling. And but when the Saints won, it was like the best on-field party, and we were walking around the celebration shooting this video. And I was there with a couple of my colleagues, and Reggie Bush was a part of it. And this woman kept following us around, and I'm like, "Who is this woman?" You know, like, who is this that keeps following us? And they're like, "That's Kim Kardashian. She's dating Reggie Bush." And I'm like, "What's a Kim Kardashian?" You know, like, and then they told me, and I was like, "Oh," but to your point, yes, people see that. Teenage girls see that you could become a millionaire off of TikTok, you know, off of like lip syncing to a, you know, some hip hop music and showing how like awesome your body is at 17, you know, which, you know, like, yeah, no shit, 17. Like, you know, try it at 30, 47 and I'll be impressed. But, you know, my point is there's nothing wrong with female beauty and there's nothing wrong with self-empowerment, but like there is something wrong in a society that rewards clicks and attention over substance. And there is definitely something wrong in like that being a goal for everybody. You know, like you need to tap into what your gifts are, you know, and there's nothing, performing is a gift. That's performing, you know, like I'm a performer, you know, I make videos that get a lot of hits, or at least in my little world get a lot of hits or something, you know, so I don't begrudge anybody that. And social media is a great tool for that, but you have to find your purpose in it. You know, it has to be about something more than just trying to scintillate and titillate people, because that's going to come back to haunt you. You know, that, yeah, sex sells, man, but it doesn't uplift, you know?
No, and there's actually another reality show connection to that Saints Super Bowl. It's the one that the Colts lost, and they came out in the second half, and the Saints had an onside kick, which completely shifted the momentum of the game. And the one guy who had his hands on the ball was Hank Baskett, who was married to Kendra Wilkinson, who was uh, part of the Playboy Mansion show with Hugh Hefner, and she lived in the same suburb that I did when that Super Bowl was happening. So I think that Hank put his hands in ice, and that's why like he couldn't hold on to the ball, and that seriously changed the game. From that point on, the Saints just took over the game. You know. So.
Oh yeah, that's right. I remember the power went out in the stadium too, which was a little freakish for a few minutes.
Oh yeah, yeah. There was also that one.
Yeah.
I think that could have been Vegas, like trying to cover the spread. You know, who knows?
Yeah, no, it felt weird, you know, and it was weird walking around like in the hallways of a Super Bowl in the complete dark. You know, it was like, this doesn't feel that safe.
What
But
was the cause of that? Did they ever get to the cause of it?
yeah, it was a generator thing. I think the NFL had promised to, had offered to bring in their own generators, which we always do. Oh no, our show was run on show power, right? We always have our own generators, which is these big diesel things that pollute the
Right.
environment, but provide you enough electricity to plug in all the stuff you need to do that broadcast. And I think it was a city power thing. You know, they don't have a good infrastructure down there. You know, it's New Orleans. It's probably my favorite city on this country. I love New Orleans. I could do 5 episodes on what a wonderful place that is. But, you know, it was also, I think it was an infrastructure issue, and there was some kind of political stuff involved. I forget exactly what happened, but, you know, things happen. You know, it's a big event. I've done a million things at that stadium, though. I've done NBA All-Star. I think it was one of them right here.
Hey.
The last time I did an All-Star was down there in New Orleans, and I've done 3 of them down there, I think, 2 or 3. My favorite city to do an event in. I mean, no other city that you shouldn't even go anywhere else if you have a convention or you have a sporting event or a big national event, because like nobody hosts a thing like New Orleans, and no place is more fun, but it takes its toll. Anyway, so let's talk about Fox News. We kind of have a theme here, and you know, this Jen Psaki is kind of turning into a star. I don't know if you've seen these press conferences, but she shuts down these trolls that come at her. You know, something named Ducey we talked about on the show before. He's
Uh-huh.
a Ducey. This Ducey guy just basically goes in there and trolls her with these dumb questions every day. And then the other day, the New York Post did the same thing. And the Post isn't news. Fox News isn't news. These are basically entertainment outlets owned by Robert Murdoch, designed to sort of keep his constituency off balance politically, because he makes a lot of money off the football, NASCAR crowd that we just discussed, right? So keeping them away from the truth is the end game for this, Australian born, media mega billionaire, right? So it's like, and his guy left, right? Trump was his dude. He's left office. So now his only play is to harass the current administration. And the fact that these guys can go into the briefing room every day and not ask real questions, but just troll the press secretary is mind-boggling to me, because it's almost an act of terrorism. It's taking away space, intellectual space. It's interfering with the fourth estate, which is a free and fair press, able to ask their government questions. Because every time one of those, entertainers that's let in playing a reporter asks a question, they take away a legitimate question, from somebody. And sometimes the White House press corps can be its own worst enemy, as we saw in that first press conference. But I guess my point is, there's something going on here with this story. They're in DEFCON 4 right now. Tucker Carlson and, Fox News and Sean Hannity, like, their guy is lost, but they have a full court press to shut down free speech and make, to hobble the success that Biden has had immediately. Like, right, hundreds of millions of people have vaccinated. Everybody's got a check. Most people have got a check. We're talking infrastructure. We got a big stimulus package. Like, we're he's batting like 400 or whatever it is. If that is that a good batting average?
300 would be good, but he's at 400. Yeah,
exactly, right. So
he's kicking it. He's kicking ass and taking names. That's for damn sure.
Right, and they see that. They're aware of that. Rupert Murdoch, sitting on his super yacht, down there and off the Cayman Islands, is aware of that. So it's like they're telling these people, go hard, go now. It's why you have Mitch McConnell saying this week, as he came out and said, like, yeah, corporations don't have a right to interfere in politics. They need to keep their opinions to themselves. Mitch McConnell's whole thing was Citizens United, was allowing corporations to be viewed as individuals so they could donate as much money as they wanted to the politicians that could advance their interests economically, right? Like that is his reason for existing on this planet. That and putting conservative justices, which his only reason for putting conservative justices on the bench is so they'll pass things like Citizens United, which the Supreme Court did for him, right? So it's the most ironic statement ever to come out of an American politician. And irony is dead as we know it, but it's another indication of like how scared they are and how much they desperately need to hold on to power, and how they know that an economic boycott will have its effect on the people that they're trying to keep in the dark and keep ignorant and keep subservient to this GOP way of life. They know that, like, if people start boycotting Coke and Coke pushes back, that things are going to change down there in Georgia. That people aren't going to stand for this BS that they keep pulling. So they're all hands on deck on, like, let's shut this down now and still continue to control the narrative. And they're good at that.
Well, and I hate to burst the bubble of my alt-right friends and Nazis out there that might be listening to this, but white supremacy isn't good for business anymore. Like, cancel culture is consequence culture. It's not, you're not being canceled. You are facing consequences, which you probably have never faced at any point in your life. Welcome to real life. There's consequences to what you say, to what you do. And that includes government and private business as the engine that runs this system we call capitalism, which at this point, making money is really all that the United States stands for, in my opinion. We're at a point where private industry has to step in and say, no, this is wrong. You're going against our customer base, and they're starting to rebuke us for your ignorance. Like, this isn't going to stand. So
well said. Very well said, Jimmy. Jimmy gets the quote of the week. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it in a nutshell, my friend. And To Tom Cotton, right? Tom Cotton had a guy from Arkansas. His family goes back to the slave owning days. They had slaves, as a lot of Americans did, but not most Americans don't become senators that try to perpetuate, the enslavement of human beings for their own profit. Tom's whole reason for existing and coming from a wealthy family was based on the exploitation of others, right?
Mm-hmm.
He had a statement this week that we're an under incarcerated country. First of all, we incarcerate more people than any other country on earth. We
Mm-hmm.
have more people living behind bars in this country than any other modern industrialized nation. Okay. And when they're in there, it becomes gladiator school. They get tortured in there. Everybody likes to make the jokes about dropping the soap or whatever. That shouldn't happen. No matter who you are, if you go to prison, you shouldn't get assaulted and beat up and murdered. But like right now, we're like, who cares about those people? They're prisoners. Well, most of them are just poor people with trauma. They're drug addicts. They're people who caught up in drugs. They're people of color. They're people that the economic and judicial system has been against in perpetuity. As long as this country has been in existence, we've unfairly locked up blacks, minorities, and poor people, right? So Tom Cotton is like, I want to continue that. We're not doing enough of it. And don't even get me started on private prisons and how evil and corrupt that thing is. But he's basically coming out and saying it. He's saying we don't lock up enough people. Y'all are getting mouthy out there. I'm tired of hearing this woke BS. Y'all don't know your place, and we're going to lock up more of you. That's what the guy's saying. If you look at the dude's face, he looks just like a black and white picture of an SS guard or a Nazi.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had a picture pop up in my timeline this morning on Facebook from the LBJ Museum out at the University of Texas in Austin. And I was out there with Graham Nash, Jimmy Carter, Mavis Staples, and David Boies, of all people, years ago. Not that many years ago, but 5-6 years ago. I was there with Graham. I was his road manager. And they gave us a private tour of like the Civil Rights Center. They have a library there. And we were walking around, and in one of the back offices, they had all these photographs of like Jim Crow era Texas, right? Like the redneck. You know what I mean? Like as racist dudes as you're ever going to see in front of these Confederate flags, like these white men. And the anger and the hate in their faces is palpable, and you can see it in that guy's face and Tom Cotton's face. It does something to your soul to be consumed by that much hate, and the eyes are the windows of the soul, so you can see it on the people. Just like that clip of like the dog that hid behind the couch when he saw Darth Vader.
Yeah, I love that.
No, and speaking of that, every time I saw a dog around Trump, he started barking. And these were like service dogs that were doing bomb sweeps in the museum and stuff. Trained dogs would freak out when they saw that guy, which tells you a lot, dude. Dogs know, and they sense fear, and underneath hatred is fear. That's what it really is. They're masking. White supremacy is truly like, we're not going to measure up against these guys. We're afraid of these guys. We're afraid of black masculinity, black sexuality, black athleticism. You know what I mean? That's the heart of this thing, is stuff that these guys didn't want to think about. When they brought these enslaved people over from Africa, they're like, oh my God, like these dudes are ripped, like these guys. What were you going to say?
I was going to say that I don't mean to be graphic about slavery, but we bred slaves so that they would be genetically superior. Like that was the intention. Let's try to create the most powerful people that we can so that they can be exploited as labor.
Right. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
And so, the root of this is fear and insecurity, which again is stupid because everybody has their purpose. It's not like European white males aren't good at some things. You know what I mean? We've gotten out of hand, and we've been in charge too long in a lot of ways because we've skewed, we've moved the goalposts and we've made it an unfair thing, and like, let's just go back to writing symphonies, and like making beer, craft beer, and like, writing plays and all these other things that everybody can do, but like sort of more, more philanthropical, like let's give something back to to the country and to the world instead of trying to exert our dominance on the world, you know? But that's what is inherent in MAGA and in white supremacy and in all this stuff, you know. And I see these guys on the road with their big jacked up pickup trucks and all this and their NRA stickers. It's like, bro, you're driving to Parsippany, New Jersey. You know, the only ranch you've ever seen is on a plate of chicken wings, you know, and it's salad dressing. Like, you're not going and pulling logs out of the ground with that truck. You're parking it in a parking lot and walking into a customer service job, you know, where you answer the phone all day. Like, let's be real here. But you're riding that thing down the highway like you're getting ready to roll into Fallujah, you know, with all your gun stickers and everything. That's toxic. That's toxic masculinity that's been packaged and sold to a demographic of men, mostly men, but women too, that feel left behind, you know, that don't understand why the suburbs have waned in many ways in this country. You know, when I came of age in the 80s, the suburbs were king. It was all about the malls. And in the 70s, people fled the inner cities because of all the unrest that boiled over after the systemic racism of the 60s and stuff. You know, cities got kind of burned out and bombed out, for lack of a better word. And people were like, it was called white flight, and they all fled to the suburbs. And then the NRA came in power and said, well, okay, now you've escaped the inner city, but you need to protect yourself out here in the suburbs. You need guns because they're going to come after you and take what you have. So you better arm up, you know? And it was not true. It wasn't real, but it was a marketing ploy. You know, fear sells, and fear sells even more if you align it to someone's nationalistic identity or their ethnic identity, because then they feel like it taps into an age old, like almost primeval tribal sense of like fear. And that's an easy thing to manipulate people with. And the NRA and Reagan became a master of this. And then they started making films with Charlton Heston. My uncle, Chris Casler, made those films in the 80s, you know, these BS films that, like, you know, From My Cold Dead Hands, you know, this thing where it was like Moses was telling you to like get a gun, you know, it was bullshit. You don't need a gun, get a fucking baseball bat. You know what I mean? I got a kitchen full of knives. Like, if I have to fight it out in my house, I'm going old school. You know, I'm getting a big ass steak knife and going Game of Thrones on you, you know? And will I win in a gunfight? No, but odds are that's not going to happen. You know, and I'm certainly not going to have a loaded gun in my house expecting it to happen, you know. And that's the problem, is that you get one of those things and you think it's going to happen. You know, I had a friend that we'll have on the show sometime. He was an NYPD police officer, and his story is remarkable because I've known him since before he was a cop. We were roommates. I saw when he was a cop, you know, he was a beat cop in Queens in the 90s when it was all about stop and frisk and harassing minorities. And that's what they were hired to do. A lot of these guys were just hired to go in there and rough up the gangs and the people that had guns and were selling drugs and stuff, and just make their lives hell to, quote unquote, clean up the cities. You know, that's what Giuliani was all about, right? Mm-hmm. But that guy told me once, I worked as a waiter next to a gun store, you know, in like this strip mall in Maryland, right when I started acting. You know, it was a wonderful time in my life, but it was this weird time, and there was a gun store next door. And I said, hey, there's a gun store next door. Like, maybe I should get a gun or something, you know, just like a dumb statement of an early 21-year-old, you know, had a few bucks. And he goes, dude, don't buy a gun. Don't ever buy a gun, because if you buy a gun, sooner or later, you're going to want to use it.
Exactly.
And he also said you drink too much to have a gun, which was even better advice, you know, which is also a true fact. You know, I laugh about it, but like, you know, I'm in recovery. I don't drink anymore. I haven't drank in a long time, you know, and but I used to drink, you know, and alcoholism and handguns don't mix, you know, and people get drunk and kill themselves all the time. Or worse, they kill someone else or they kill their wife. You know, it's not something you need more of in this country. And this argument, you know, and we can close out the show with this, and I'll let you get in a word here, but this argument about like they're coming to take your guns is bullshit. There's 400 million guns already before last year in America in circulation, right? Last year, we added 50 million guns to that number, right? So we're almost at 500 million guns, and we're 6 months into, you know, or, you know, 4 months into this year, right? So we're heading towards 500 million guns, you know, in a country with a population of about 330 million people. right? So that's
Hmm.
almost twice, 2 guns for every man, woman, and child, right? So no one's coming to take those guns. If you already have that gun for self-protection, in your bedstand or hopefully locked up in a safe in your closet, you're good. No one's coming
Hmm.
to knock on your door and take that gun. And anybody with common sense knows that. They know that that's the reality. They know that Walmart's never going to stop selling shotguns and deer hunting rifles and things that you need for sport or to protect your property. That's a given. That's not coming, that's never being taken away. But what the NRA found out was that the guns that people buy to hunt other people, your AR-15s, your Armalite rifles, all these kind of things became
Hmm.
super popular in the last 15 years since the weapons, assault weapons ban was taken away by Bush, right? That stuff became very popular. It's a big seller because guys sit home and watch Netflix all day long and watch Narcos and think they're going to have a shootout in Mayapack, when the bad guys come to their door, right? So those weapons, and here's the other thing. Those weapons are very profitable and people buy them like crazy. They're made for hunting people. Here's the other thing about guns. They don't break. Generally guns don't wear out. You can go walk into a museum and find a
Right.
300-year-old gun and it'll still probably fire. Guns don't like wear out. They're not cars. You don't need a new one every 6 years. You know what I mean? It's not a computer. You don't need to update the software. It's not going to run your bullets anymore because you haven't updated it. Do you know what I'm saying? The,
Uh-huh.
the,
Yeah.
the 38 you bought in 1965 is going to put a hole in your head just as well in 2021, So that's a problem, right? So when you're selling a product that doesn't have an expiration date, that's not a good business model. There's a reason you can't use last year's adapter on this year's Mac. Why it goes to Thunderbolt 3 and 4 and stuff, because they need you to buy new stuff all the time. If you want a profitable industry, you have to keep people buying your products. And the NRA is a marketing organization. It's marketing isn't the right term. It's a trade group. Their job is to represent gun manufacturers and make sure those manufacturers can make as much money as possible. It's also to launder money for the Russians, but that's a whole different thing. And we're now finding that out, and Maria Butina is now like the top talk show host in Russia, the NRA's darling of just a year ago. So, but that's a tangent. But I hope I made my point. Like the NRA is trying to sell you products designed for no other reason than to kill other people. Those weapons were designed for the jungles of Vietnam to cut through dense foliage, strike a human body, for the bullets to go in and do as much damage as possible. Right now, those weapons are being used in classrooms, in supermarkets, in massage parlors, and they have been for over 20 years. And it's an epidemic. So anybody who stands in the way of that and uses it as an excuse to be a patriot or a Second Amendment rights, it's bullshit. It's not what this is about. This is about one company that has their CEO hiding out on a yacht when he thinks he's in trouble, but wants you to have teenagers unregistered carrying handguns and being able to buy them, or assault rifles, and buying them freely at Walmart.
And another problem with it, at least in my generation, we've glorified guns to an extreme extent, from movies to video games. Grand Theft Auto is one of the most popular games that I grew up playing, and part of the issue too is there's a lack of parenting. When you have a child that plays games like that all the time and doesn't realize, hey, this isn't real life, it's an alternate reality that I'm projecting through a gaming system. That's when you kind of get some issues there. But it's just, it's unfortunate that consumer capitalism has actually permeated something as long lasting as firearms. Because, like you said, it's not like you need to update your gun every year.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They don't run out.
Yeah.
This model no longer supports these bullets. Like it's the
Yeah.
same shit. It's a piece of lead with some gunpowder behind it that gets struck with a hammer, or a firing pin, and it puts a hole in what you pointed at. It's not,
I still think Chris Rock's idea is the best idea.
yeah,
Have all the guns you want, just get bullet control.
exactly. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
great idea, but it's a good
Yeah.
joke, but
Yeah.
Yeah, Chris is the man. Anyway, and you're right about that. It's like every show I watch has all this graphic violence in it. Can't I just watch a show on Netflix where somebody doesn't get tortured, where somebody doesn't get murdered or shot up? That's why I love The Queen's Gambit so much. I was like, thank God. Like they finally made a show for people like me that don't want to see pain and bloodshed right before I go to sleep, because I watch a show, before I go to sleep at night. And it is part of our culture. And that's nothing new. I was given, when I was a kid, it was a cap gun, it was playing guns. It was like what we played cowboys and Indians when I was a kid. Talk about unpolitically correct, that was what they like. That was the game, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I was a kid in the 70s, but your toys were these cowboy Colt 6 shooters, and it would come in a set with an Indian headdress with some feathers in it, and you would divide up who was cowboys and who was Indians, and then you would kill each other. That was a child's game in our culture. If you want to know where America's at, and yeah, why are you so fascinated with guns? I see so many of these teenage guys that like to shoot guns. Get guitars, man. I got a whole bunch of guitars. You can never have too many guitars. Like pick that up. That's fun. You can get some aggression out with a guitar. Get a big Marshall amp and crank that thing up to 10 and rock the fuck out. Sorry for cursing. You don't need to shoot things. You don't need to kill something, dude. There's enough of that already. Make something better.
Do you remember the second Ace Ventura when he walks into that room with all the different taxidermy stuff on the wall, and he's like, "This is a lovely room of death." I mean, that's another horrible thing about guns. I have all these friends who hunt, which America's the only place where people hunt on a full stomach. You can hunt, but why do you have to glorify it by posting a picture? And you're holding the animal's head up. It's like, what are you doing? Like you're pro-life and you're glorifying death of an animal that doesn't have to necessarily die. Like I don't get it.
The same kind of thing. It's like, this is our lineage and my grandfather hunted and stuff. And it's really just commercialism. That's why there's Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's. How much crap do they sell you? But these guys, the Indians, the Native Americans would hunt like with a bow and arrow and their clothes that they made. They would use everything out of the animal they killed. They would worship the animal. They would see it as a sacrifice, and they would see themselves as part of the ecosystem. It wasn't dishonoring it. Americans, hunters is like, they go to Cabezas or whatever it's called. They buy deer urine. They buy every kind of camouflage thing and all this gear. They set up stands in the woods. They get so camouflaged that the thing doesn't have a chance. Then they kill it. They take a selfie with it. They strap it to the front of their pickup truck and drive home so everybody can look at it, and then they stick it in a freezer and don't eat it and have its head stuffed on its wall. It's like, it's not part of the, I live where there's coyotes, right? And last night I was going to sleep and the coyotes had killed something, and if you've ever heard real hunting, like feral hunting in nature, like a pack of coyotes killing something, it's bone chilling. It was terrifying because they scream and celebrate the death in this way that's chilling. It's natural in nature, but it's scary and awe-inspiring, and it has some danger in it, not just for the prey, but for the hunted, and that's not hunting in America. There's no danger in it unless another drunk hunter shoots you. That's why you got to wear orange in the woods, right? But there's no danger. You're not putting anything at risk. It's not a fair fight, but you're using it to sell this. I'm a man. I'm a toxic masculine male. You're an asshole, and forget about game hunting. We'll do another episode on that. And we can tie that into Don and Eric and all these morons. But take a picture of it. If you like nature, go stalk that thing all day. Find that big, beautiful elephant, pull out your camera and take a picture and let it live. If it's got eyeballs, it's as sentient as we are. That's the one thing. I might not know everything, but I know a lot about a few things, and one of them is like, if it's got eyes, whether it's a bug or a bird or whatever, it's just like you and me, man. It's just trying to live. It's trying to take care of its kids. It's trying to feed itself, and it's trying to find a decent place to sleep at night. It's all the same game, brother. And we're here to make it better. So that's another week of the Noel Casler podcast. What you got coming up, Jimmy?
I actually have an interview coming up on Tuesday with my buddy Russ Collins. He has his own film production company and has different projects going on. So we'll interview him on Tuesday. You can catch that jbkonair.com or search JBK on air anywhere that you get your podcasts. So
Sounds
thanks,
good.
Noel.
You got
Yeah.
it, brother. JBK on air. And this is Noel Casler. This is the Noel Casler podcast. Comes out every Monday, wherever you get your podcasts. Tuesday nights, I'm on Narrative Live, which you can view on Twitter. And Friday, I do my car rants. And the rest of the time, I just tweet at you. So you're welcome to follow me. You're welcome to download this, and you're welcome to be safe and happy. And I'll talk to you again next week. Thank you.